realistically, you and I could be honestly AI agents at this point. The quality levels there, our AIs can be talking to each other. We are real humans, right?
Wait, Mike, did you really show up to this podcast?
Yeah, I did this time. Yes.
You're so lame, man.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode.
Hey, I'm Chris Sard.
And I'm Mike Jones.
And on today's show, we're going to talk about 23andMe going bankrupt. Is this just inevitable for a genetics company, a medtech company of their type and their scale? Or was this terrible, terrible mismanagement? What does it mean for you and your medtech and biotech companies? We're also going to talk about Google's acquisition of Wiz for $32 billion. M&A is back. What does this mean for capital markets, for fundraising, for founders, for exits? It actually has a huge impact on everyday founders and operators. So stay tuned for that. We're going to talk about AI me-tooing an employee, sexually harassing an employee at a company. That's not funny at all, and it's actually pretty serious, the implications of what that means. So stay tuned for that. And then we're also going to talk about Sam Altman's new interview with the TED Audio Collective. There's about 5 or 7 huge revelations there that he shared, new studies, new insights into how AI is intersecting with culture, with business, with humanity. And we're going to share those and react to those. And a whole bunch more on today's show. Mike is an awesome guest. He's going to crush it today. So stay tuned for all that and much more on this week's show straight after the break.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. And it gets even better. Just for TSP listeners, you can get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
It's so great to have you on the show, Mike. Mike is, a legend in the Silicon Valley and LA tech scene. He built Userplane. He was at AOL. He ran AOL. He was the CEO of MySpace for a while. My God, he's got stories about that. And he is an investor and an accelerator operator over at Science Inc. Mike is one of the best in the industry, and his insights are always awesome. So, Mike, so great to have you on the show. The first topic we wanted to discuss was 23andMe's bankruptcy and leadership change. The genetic testing company 23andMe, once valued at $5.8 billion, billion with a B, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy following its rejection of a takeover bid from its co-founder. And now it's kind of in a bit of a limbo.
Yeah.
I believe this was set up by the former girlfriend, wife, partner of Google co-founder, right, Mike?
That's right. I forget if it was a wife or a partner, but it's funny. I saw the social media fodder today. I'm like, make sure to request to delete your 23andMe data, and hopefully it'll get done before the bankruptcy gets finalized. So I think everyone's concerned, like, who buys this data and what happens to this data. So if you gave them your genetic data and it gets acquired by somebody you don't like, do you still have any protection over this data? Like, what's going to happen to your data? Who's going to end up basically purchasing it? It's pretty interesting question.
Yeah, it's true. I'm advising companies in med tech and biotech, and 23andMe comes up over and over and over again as either a success story or a cautionary tale about, like, oh, we don't want to do what those guys did, dump lots of money and beat direct-to-consumer growth, and oh my God, and we got to make sure we find a business model, and look how great they were at building consumer interest, and it's kind of like this push and pull of 23andMe as the poster child and the cautionary tale. I mean, it just strikes me as a bit shocking that they couldn't find an application to monetize all of this rich data.
I agree. And I mean, I think of 23andMe as a medical company for me, right? Like, I really used it not only to figure out my ancestors and who are related to, but also some specific genetic conditions. And it brings up this question, like, there's functional health and all these kind of high valued, medical grade startups that, if you sign up, you're giving them tons of your data and you're relying them to be there. And the question then comes with, in the wake of a bankruptcy or somebody acquiring them, what happens to your data? So you thought you were giving your genetic data to a protected source. You think that you're with a medical grade company that's going to be protecting your health records. What happens if they go out of business? Where does that data end up? And do you feel good about that? And maybe there's a risk here in utilizing venture capital that may or may not be permanent for medical grade services.
Yeah, I think for consumers, it's a data question, but for founders and for operators, reading the tea leaves from the outside, it feels like just a giant deep, deep leadership and product dysfunction that you can have such a strong brand, such a strong data asset, such huge backing from incredible people, smart people around, and deep dysfunction that you can't find the logical adjacencies, the business model, the product. Like, surely there was something in there to go do other than sit around and die slowly.
I agree.
The one thing that I talk to a lot of biotech and medtech companies I advise is like 23andMe is a really bad example because you only need to get genetic testing once. It's not like a blood test or a microbiome test where you can do that actually every month, every 2 or 3 months, because the system changes. There's no LTV for or longitudinal LTV for a genetic test.
So you think it was a business model problem because like I paid one time, I wasn't subscribed to it. Suddenly I didn't really upgrade my test. Like I know that I got my genetic testing with 23andMe a long time ago, and they came forth like you need to get version 2 of your test done, and I never really signed up for it. But your point is that it's a one-time revenue source that didn't have sustainability, and we're assuming that revenue was the problem.
Well, I'm a product guy, so I think it's a revenue problem, but revenue problems are product problems. It's like they didn't find the applications of the data. They didn't find the next test to give you. They didn't find the next reason to believe. So I think it's a product problem. And then I think both product problems are leadership problems. It's just like set up, have some vision, have some other adjacency, keep going.
Well, you have to ourselves amazing, like with everything's happened with AI, the next version of 23andMe will probably be like 1,000 times smarter and better, right? Like, well, we'll actually be able to tell you if you start feeding genetic data into AI. I mean, obviously a lot of privacy risks around that, but the next version will be probably pretty incredible.
All right, well then let's segue that into one big Google adjacent failure, because I don't know, there was some family relationship to Google there, to a Google success, I guess. Google has acquired Wiz for $32 billion. Now, other than peeing, I didn't know what Wiz was until this announcement. So let me give you the story just a little bit here. So Alphabet plans to acquire cybersecurity company Wiz for $32 billion. Making its largest acquisition ever. Wiz was founded 5 years ago. 5 years ago, that is a lot of equity accretion. It's rapidly grown to an impressive revenue growth and robust product line, it's solving cloud security. So across multi-cloud, it can detect security penetrations, and it's obviously going into the Google Cloud security offering over there. And increasing competition with AWS and Azure. And now Google has an offering, one of their cloud services, one of their GCP tools, which can work across AWS and Azure as well, which I think is really smart.
Do you think this is like a bolt-on where basically if I use Google Cloud Services, I now can utilize this service across other instances? So this is like an addition to their current cloud business?
Yeah, I think it's an addition to their business, but I think more importantly, it's a Trojan horse into their competitor businesses, right? So it's like, oh, don't worry, you're on AWS, but you can just use a little GCP, use a little Google tools. Our Google Wiz is compatible with AWS. You should try that. And then once you're in Wiz, you're upselling or cross-selling over to GCP. Like, you're using S3. Maybe you should consider using Firebase for whatever.
And I mean, you have to assume that like the current rate of active enterprise-grade hacking at the cloud level, whether it's on consumer data breaches or company data breaches, has to be escalating at an immense pace. And again, introduction of AI and these like AI agents and massive levels of compute have to basically escalate this. So do you think Google's not only making a bet saying, yeah, I want to expand our services so that we can touch some components of AWS or whatever, but also do you think that they're positioning this as saying like the future is going to have a lot of cyber warfare and a lot of hacking? We have to basically be bolting services up to kind of participate in the defense of that?
Yeah, it's, AI changes the equation for everything, everywhere, all at once. And, as a operator, as a startup founder, you've got to think like, where do we position ourselves to win? And, misinformation, disinformation, it massively increases. Cybersecurity threats massively increase. Political unrest potentially increases. And, think through all of the second, third order effects. I mean, I don't know what Wiz's posture or technology stack for AI specifically is. And but certainly a first-class team, technology, business in that space that you can build on something feels right to me, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a good bet. I think that cybersecurity is going to get way more important in people's lives. I think data breaches are going to be prolific and everyone's going to be impacted by them. And, right now, if I think to myself, like, who's really protecting me, who's protecting my data, like Google isn't who comes to mind. Like I'm assuming AWS, I'm assuming Google services, help. But I think like having businesses that I trust that are kind of on consumer side to protect them from data breaches is probably a great bet for Google. And if that's an expansionary path for them, that's super interesting.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And what it really says, perhaps much more broadly, is M&A is back, right? By way of context, for those who aren't following this stuff as closely as us nerds, Mike, for the last 2, 3, 4 years, one of the dings against the Biden administration, one of the reasons I think that millionaires and billionaires and the tech elite love Trump is because they believed the Biden administration, and Lena Khan especially, was hostile to M&A. I mean, I think rightly believed, right? There was pretty high probability they'd try to shut down one of your big deals. And so, Khan is out, Biden is out, Trump is in. Say what you will about him and his buffoonery. Now you can go buy things again. And as we've talked about on the show before, big tech making big deals sets big valuation ceilings, which sets big public equity valuation caps, which set, big Series A, Series B, Series C valuation kind of caps. It decompresses the entire Silicon Valley venture capital ecosystem, and allows everything to just flow more easily and for us to head back to some level of ZERPy goodness. You're a capital allocator. You do this all day, Mike. You see thousands of companies to invest in, to support. Like, does this affect your psychology? Like now, yeah, exits are possible again, IPOs are possible again. How much does it affect your day-to-day investment decision making?
Well, the way it'll affect it is if you think about all the investors I talk with, right? And so let's say that we're talking with a few hundred investors to invest in our, Science Fund 4 or whatever. Some portion of them will be receiving proceeds from this particular acquisition, right? Like you said, like 32 or whatever billion will kind of flow out. A bunch will go back to investors. They'll see major gains, and hopefully they'll want to redeploy that capital back into venture and basically find that same loop and cycle, right? So as M&A becomes healthy and as values unlocked through these types of public or private transactions, that capital hopefully flows back into the base level seed fund, Series A, B, C, D, E, F funds in order to basically fuel more innovation. So you're exactly right. There's the kind of hopefully removal of fear that the SEC might block transactions, because hopefully under Trump administration, those transactions get through and we're not seeing a bunch of, potentially monopolistic pushback. And the second piece is that as the capital flows back to allocators, and particularly LPs for us, they'll actually redeploy within venture. So you're right. It does kind of create this expansion effect that should create more capital to early and mid and late stages. That'll flow more to venture, into more innovation. That'll start up more startups and go through that process. So yeah, it's a super positive move. In addition, I think we're all waiting for when the public markets feel good again, right? There's a whole bunch of consumer IPOs ready. In our space, Poppy was just acquired, which was a really big deal because we do a lot of things in CPG and in beverage. And so seeing code that also kind of unlocks value and unlocks movement. So as all this stuff happens, that log jam of companies that have been waiting to be acquired or waiting to go public, hopefully that starts flowing. And then suddenly you get more capital moving through our system and we get to go build better companies.
It's super interesting how different pockets of the world interpret these events in such different ways. You got everyone from over on the AOC world or whatever, Lena Khan world, is like big tech buying big deals bad. And then on the business side, it's like, holy shit, we could start to deploy capital and invest again and create jobs again. And like, there's this kind of, the wheel keeps turning. All right, so let's pivot a little bit from cybersecurity to personal security and kind of misinformation and fraud and all this kind of stuff. There's a story I read on LinkedIn. It's from a guy called Joe DeWolf. He's the founder of a company called Novel. I have no idea if the story is true or not. There's no way to prove it, but I think it's a good little bedtime story, if nothing else, to riff on an idea that I think is going to become a real thing. He was saying he's at dinner with a CEO, and the CEO's lawyer calls him with horrific news. He says this is a true story. The lawyer says that a new employee claims to have had several Zoom meetings with the CEO. And he's been demanding inappropriate things of this new employee, and she has audio recordings to prove it. So, it's basically a HR sexual harassment Me Too claim against the CEO. And the CEO goes, nope, that's impossible. Never happened. He's like, no fucking way. I did not do that. And the lawyer's like, I'm going to send you the recordings that she's sent. This guy says it in a kind of funny way. He's like, guess what happens next? Was the CEO lying? Was he telling the truth, but it was some impersonator? Or was he telling the truth and it was an AI bot? Turns out, you guessed it, an employee likely, had been Zooming this new employee, this kind of naive employee who didn't know the company very well yet, and spoofing the CEO with AI voice duplication, probably maybe some video duplication, and had been having 20-minute long video chats with her, basically trying to get her, harassing her. And now they're trying to figure out who the hell was doing this, using AI to spoof the CEO and basically do inappropriate things. Now, again, I don't know if this story is true. I don't know who the CEO is. You can't read everything you read on the internet. You can't believe everything you read on the internet. But this is going to happen more, right? We've heard that story about someone called and they're saying that their kid was in trouble and they need to do something. You start to hear about these little AI spoofing things. Kind of just, I guess, as a cultural question, as a personal security question, as a tech question, Mike, do you think this stuff is a little overplayed or overstated, or?
I think it's going to become a major issue. So it's funny. I'm not really funny, but last year, my son's high school was swatted in that, like, there was a recording made stating that it was through a series of schools in Colorado where at the same time the schools all received this threat call that there was a shooter on campus and it was supposedly a credible threat and they could hear gunshots in the background. And multiple cities kind of went on lockdown and multiple schools were evacuated, only to determine that it was a foreign actor calling from outside the US to a local police department, to a local school, playing a AI or falsified recording that essentially shut down these towns and had all these schools evacuated and disrupted the lives of many and created trauma within these students, right? And that was a year or two ago, right? To think now the level of disruption you could do through AI, whether it's through voice cloning, images, video, I mean, it's actually pretty unbelievable. Realistically, you and I could be honestly AI agents at this point. The quality levels there, our AIs could be talking to each other. We are real humans, right?
Wait, Mike, did you really show up to this podcast?
Okay, yeah, I did this time. Yes.
You're so lame, man.
But the reality is, like, it doesn't have to be, right? Like, this could be not me, right? This could be AI me. It would not have been hard to do. And so, yes, there's the like, oh my God, what if somebody wants to single you out and create a recording and they want to do something terrible to you or catfish you, or they want to like gaslight you, or they want to do something to your reputation? Obviously not hard to do. But the second piece is, what if you want to shut down the school? What if you want to shut down the city? What if you want to call in fake reports? And then also, what happens to the police? What happens to our overall infrastructure if they can't determine what's real and what's fake, right? And I would argue we're very vulnerable. So, what we saw within Colorado when this happened is that the police stations that got the calls or the schools were unable to determine where the call was coming from. They eventually found it was from a foreign caller, but it's not like they had an ID. They'll go, this is a verified call with a verified problem. And if they had seen that this was coming from outside the country, maybe they wouldn't have actually responded or shut the schools down. But it was really easy, and we were very vulnerable to that moment where this happened, right? And it was really, really terrible. And so I think we're about to step into this world where we're not going to know what's real or fake. I think it's going to be all over social media. I think it's a huge vulnerability because we're all essentially looking at the same newspaper every morning. We're looking at the same social feeds. We're seeing the same videos, which means we have concentrated attention into one place. And if something goes big, we all see it at the same time, and there's no independent reporters, there's independent news agencies verifying the authenticity of this. We're consuming this stuff in real time. We're all consuming it the same, which means we're all impacted the same in real time, and it can be extremely disruptive, right? And so you go back to like, the original like alien broadcast on radio. Was that George Orwell that did that, right? Like the old, like they did like a fake radio broadcast of like aliens.
This is the War of the Worlds. Scared the hell out of everybody. They thought it was real.
So that's where we're at, right? Like we have a concentrated consumption within social platforms. We're not having any validation of what you're posting, that it's real or not. And it's really easy basically to create these synthetic videos. So I think we're about to see waves and waves of this. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
The real-time destruction of like disrupting the classroom, hurting the kids with that story you just told, the potential lawsuit against the CEO who was innocent, that is kind of localized distraction that is very painful and very real. But as you pointed to, as a systems thinker, as a long-term thinker, I'm much more concerned about the long-term destruction of society, because nothing can be depended on to be real anymore. We no longer have shared priors, shared mental models, shared fundamental truth. And like democracy and society is like rests on trust. It fundamentally rests on basic social contracts and the ability to trust some basic common truths. It's unraveling more and more and more quickly. You know, you and I both we met in the social apps era, building social tools, right? You were doing, what was it called? User
Plane. It was like real-time chat, instant messaging, presence services, streaming, music streaming, it was all real time. Like everything was based on real time.
You and I had very similar view of the world and sort of similar adjacent businesses and products. So I had a thing called Echo, which is also real-time social engagement widgets, and you were building real-time social engagements. They were a different suite, mostly, and they kind of fit together very nicely. And I don't know if I don't want to speak for you, but I believed social media and social tools would democratize authenticity and sharing and telling out true stories. And in the end, it really democratized and mainstream trolling and misinformation, and created sort of these filter bubbles.
There was a beauty to building community, right? Like, and having everybody connect, because the websites at that point were so isolating. It was just you and a computer. And suddenly when you went to these websites, you could actually meet other people and have these interactions with other people. I don't think what we assumed, though, at the time was that these millions and millions of individual communities would kind of synthesize or kind of aggregate into a single community, which is a Facebook feed, a TikTok feed, a Instagram feed. And so suddenly there's all this power given, because once everybody's consuming the same piece of media at the exact same place, you really don't get a diversification of trust or voice. You have a singular platform, which again creates a really, really easy attack surface if you want to manipulate people. Right. So I think, yeah, in a world where there was millions of individual communities, everyone was kind of verifying within their own community settings, we lost that when we moved to kind of a consolidated consumption model.
I would say this slightly differently. I would say the problem is that there are, and it's funny, one of the taglines I had was for audiences of one. I would say actually we fragmented into, while we're all looking at the same feed, we're all consuming different worldviews that just feed our reptilian brain what we want to hear. So one feed, millions or thousands of different bubbles. Actually,
right.
mostly two, right? Like left and right. And so it's. I don't think the problem is a consolidation of consumption, rather a fragmentation of consumption. But what I do think has happened is there's been a collapse in trust and accountability. So we're just all anonymous people yelling at each other. So when you go from small communities, you have some kind of reputational risk, strong ties. But when you're in this large community, the feed is splitting you apart in terms of your worldview, and then the trust levels are low and the ties are weak.
Right. You're talking about the echo chamber thesis of like, yeah, I step into the Facebook feed, but I'm just hearing things that already support my predispositions, my feelings. I just feel like more from a how do you disrupt society perspective.
Yes,
it's pretty easy to disrupt society. What I also wonder is like for the CEO that was called out for, falsified data with malicious whatever behavior that was all fake, there's almost no way for them to go back and retract that. Right. It's kind of like when you read the article in the newspaper and they realize there was something wrong and they write like a retraction the next day. But then you think to yourself, well, 100,000 people probably read the article and only 3,000 people saw the retraction. So therefore you have 97,000 people that basically have been infected by this bad view. So I think to myself, the moment that you do reputational damage to somebody, that trauma sits there. And even if you go back and say, oh, it was all fake, it's never going to reach the entire population, which means that you're always polluting somebody with some poison. And you can't really put the genie back in the bottle, right? And that's really sad.
That's so interesting. I've been working on a tool, just tinkering with it on the side, that helps you consume news media with more context. It kind of reveals the biases and logical fallacies and makes counter arguments for you as you're reading a political story. It would be really cool if it tracks the stories you've read and keeps an eye out for a month or two afterwards to see if the story gets retracted or falsified, and then like sends you an update like, hey, by the way, that article you read 17 days ago is no longer true. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, we should look into that.
But we have to assume this is just the beginning of this, right? Like
Yeah.
this is going to be so bad. At some point, I assume that whether it's Google interface or an iOS layer is going to have a visual indicator of whether you're talking to human or not, verified information, non-verified information, a kind of an overlay on top of everything you consume digitally. Otherwise, you're really just not going to know.
Yeah, so I talked earlier about all of the business opportunities that get created by all of the problems that get created by AI. We talked about, information security, cloud security, all this other stuff. One of them is going to be verifying the humanity of the person on the other line, like a live, present human, basically presence detection. And the other is going to be verifying provenance, right? What was used to create this content, and what was the chain of custody, and not was it generated by AI, because everything will be touched by AI. Every photo you take on the iPhone is touched by AI. There's an AI computational stack involved. But like, what is that chain of provenance? There's going to needs to be some open source, open standard, open consensus created around this. But boy, oh boy, we all know how hard those things are to make. So
I agree with that.
yeah.
I always thought that's like AI. Eventually, I'd be able to select an answer, and it would show me the kind of architecture of how it got to that answer. I assume they're not revealing that because they don't want to reveal the sources that they've consumed to train the AI, because it maybe opens it up for copyright dispute or patent dispute.
My understanding is, and I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is they actually don't know how it fucking works. They don't know how it encodes information into the weights. My understanding is that they just don't know. And so there is no observability of these systems. They're very, very hard to observe and to provide traceability. Now, I'd love for you in the comments to tell me I'm wrong. I'm sure maybe there's some new research about that, but that's the last I heard.
Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, FlowHealth, and Quora all use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Why aren't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.
Speaking about AI, the next topic I want to talk about was a new Sam Altman interview with the TED Audio Collective. Now, there was a period there where Sam was giving interviews every other day, and he was sort of saying basically the same things over and over. But it's been a little while since I've caught an interview with him, and he said a couple of little things that I thought were new and interesting. So maybe let me rattle some of these off, Mike, and I'd love for you to pick up any of them that seem interesting to you. Maybe you want to unpack. The first is that AI beats humans at empathy and art on blind tests. And when you don't tell the person, hey, this was created by AI, this response, this conversation, or this art, they will rate the AI's empathy and artwork higher than human art and empathy, expressions of empathy, in a blind test, which I thought was incredible. And I will say I have personally been talking to ChatGPT about, some stuff, some thoughts I've been having, and its level of insight and empathy is shocking, like shocking. The other point they made was people prefer the humans, or I sort of just said this, once they know that the other party is AI. They'll say, I like the empathy from this answer, this empathy answer over this one, or this piece of art over this one. And until you say, well, that's the AI one, they're like, oh, I don't like that. So it only works on blind tests. They've also shown studies where the top scientists have become 15% more productive when using AI as a collaboration partner for research and writing papers and so on. The rest are not becoming more productive. So you have to be kind of a top 15% scientist in terms of your productivity and the quality of your work to actually get a benefit from AI. You're kind of not only are they better at the science, they're better at using AI to create the science, which was interesting. But the rest, or rather actually, but most scientists, I think it was something like 80% are reporting less satisfaction in their work because they're kind of just working with and synthesizing AI, research and other things. So they're having less fun, but the top 15% are more productive. Sam believes that people are not going to compare themselves to what AI is doing. They're still going to care about relative status between people and relative skills between people. The example, I've heard him say this before, the example is AI chess can destroy any chess player in the world, but people are playing chess now more than ever. Humans are playing chess against other humans more than ever, and against AI more than ever. It's just people don't care. There's AI races now, like AI F1 EV type races, where there's autonomous Formula One style cars racing around, and people just don't care as much as they care about Lewis Hamilton racing around the track. So he's like, people still going to care about people. Another thing they talked about, a lot of these are about new studies. 20% of people now, the study has shown, will let go of a conspiracy theory they believe, when talking to an AI, whereas they will not let go of a conspiracy theory typically talking to another human being, because their ego is involved and it's like their identity gets wrapped up in the conspiracy theory. But when they know they're talking to an AI about a conspiracy theory, the AI will sort of just unpick it and unravel it, and they will more readily stop believing the fake conspiracy theory. And apparently what's been shown is they're then less likely to believe many other conspiracy theories that they weren't actually directly talking about to the AI about.
Funny, the conspiracy theory stat and the empathy stat, I think, actually have a similar reason, right? So like,
yes,
if I'm talking to a human about a conspiracy theory and I'm hearing their response, I'm assuming they're taking their predisposition and their opinions and then formatting the response. So they're not coming at it from a pure knowledge and truth basis. They're really coming through their lens, right? And thus I might not trust them. But if I'm talking to AI, I'm assuming AI has no specific viewpoint or motivation. AI basically is reciting to me facts. Like, I assume it's talking to a very educated encyclopedia, and thus it's going to be able to inform me without any kind of predisposition or judgment. And I think it's similar to empathy, is like, if I express to you some tragedy I'm going through, your empathetic response to me is through your lens of tragedies and experiences you've had, and then trying to think through what I might need to hear that you may have wanted to hear. It's all these layers of you and communicating back to me. Whereas if I express something to AI, it's not giving me its tragedy and its experience, its predisposition. It's simply looking for the most empathetic response it could get me off of the knowledge it has off of me, right? So in certain cases, it sounds like if AI is talking to a human and there's no bias from the AI beyond the knowledge is consumed, it has no perspective or judgment, then basically it's going to give me a response that I might trust more or feel more connected to. Versus when I'm talking to a human, I know they're bringing all their baggage to that response. They're bringing all their feelings to that response, which also, by the way, brings up the question of psychology, right? Like, if I'm talking to a psychologist, how much of their response is education versus their own personal feelings? Because you can't remove their own personal feelings. Whereas when I'm talking to an AI psychologist, they have no personal feelings, they have no personal experiences. So they're only giving me a clinical response, which may be the empathy or the response I need.
I think you're right, exactly. So I would summarize this as like, we believe the AI to have no feelings and to be dispassionate. And therefore, when it's expressing empathy, I think that feels fake. And so we recoil from the fake empathy. But when it's expressing facts about a potential conspiracy theory, we think that that's dispassionate and having no emotion, so we can trust it more. So our belief about its lack of feelings and real world experience is a double-edged sword. It works against it when we think it's expressing fake empathy, works for it when we think it's just giving us the information about the conspiracy theory.
But was your statistic on empathy that people liked the AI's empathetic response more than the humans or less than the humans?
They liked it more in a blind study. So the moment they found out it was AI, there was revulsion.
Oh, interesting. So in theory, it's better at communicating empathy because it has no predisposition. But the moment you hear it, it loses its credibility because you don't trust its response because it hasn't had the human experience.
Precisely.
Fascinating, even though it's in theory more empathetic.
Well, it's better at expressing or faking empathy.
Well, it's kind of like it does everything clinically and perfectly by the book because it's not in theory skipping any steps, right? Yeah, it's like saying if a robot sat down and you didn't know it was a robot and it ate a meal and every mannerism it had was completely perfect, the way it picked up its fork and knife and ate and had conversation, you might be like, well, this robot was completely unbelievable. The moment you heard it was a robot, you might just throw away the entire experience as basically falsified.
That's right.
So you're kind of saying people value the human condition and the human connection, even if the rule sets for society are better executed by AI.
That's right. I think this also comes down to theory of mind, right? So human beings are, I guess using some combination of empathy and, internal simulation, always imagining what the other person is thinking, feeling, acting, and trying to understand their credibility, their truth, the shared connection. And so if you're using your theory of mind and you're going, this is just a fucking simulation based on, weights and it's like, this is not real. And so, yeah, there's something about the veracity of the other entity's expression and experience that must be there.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point with art, look, let's just take writing. So like, there's no doubt that with the data that's been formatted, AI should be able to write the best movie ever created for you. Like if it knew you, it could give you a script or a book or a story that should be completely perfect for you, right?
Yes.
But you also may choose to hate it if it wasn't written by human, even though it might be the most entertaining and engaging piece of content you've ever consumed.
That's right.
Which just means that we generally discount product from technology.
Yes. I mean, so far, this might be a problem with like, we used to call people on the phone, and now if we did it now, we would be like, well, why the hell are you calling me? Like, just like text, right? And then our kids probably never even think to call someone. Why would you call someone? It makes no sense, right? And so, cultural norms and mores change, and I think these things will evolve. I think it's only a matter of time until people start, I mean, there's already sporadic reports of this, but I think it's only a matter of time until people fall deeply in love with AI and robots, and this is going to be a thing.
Interesting question. Like, let's say AI creates this piece of art, and let's say you see it and you don't know it's AI, and you look at it and you're like, this is the most wonderful piece of art I've ever seen because it's created art especially for you. And if I told you it's AI and it created it in 5 seconds, you might be like, I hate that. If I told you it's AI and it took 5 days, the question is, would you feel differently? You see what I'm saying? Like, if you thought to yourself, because what we're lacking here is time, right? Because like if a human writes a book, you're like, that took an immense amount of time and effort and creativity to write the book. If AI write the books in 3 seconds, you may not respect it because it only took 3 seconds. So the question is, if you added time back in as a variable and said, well, no, the AI took 3 years to write this book, and it's the greatest book ever created, would you then be like, oh, I really like this book?
That's so interesting. So you know how humans have these innate senses that kind of tell you like if something is far away or close, and we're not conscious of it, right? Which is like if the mountain's far away, it's more hazy, and we just know that, and we just because we've just always had that in our experience. And what you're saying is, we've always innately understood that more time means more effort, which means more value. And so just by applying time, we immediately we apply human labor to the effort. So not only are we looking at theory of mind, we're looking at theory of work and proof of work. And the way you can take this to a logical conclusion is Bitcoin valuable because it takes time to mine, right? These UX tricks, Mike, where you're signing up for these services, and there's like calculating your IBS score, calculating your personal fitness plan, and the progress bar is like moving slowly, and it's like calculating, and it is fake. It's completely fake, but we value it more because it took time, it took effort. You're right. Adding time delay makes it seem more valuable. Yeah.
Well, let me give you an example. Let's say that you used to be 300 pounds and now you're 150 pounds. And you said, I went on Ozempic and I lost the weight in 2 months. Versus you saying, I worked out for a year and this is my result. Do I think of you differently? Do I respect you differently because of time/effort? Or as your side with AI, you could also prescribe value. You say, well, we created a machine that runs AI, but the machine is all gold parts. It's a $50 million AI physical machine. And even if you said it was assembled by humans, and then when it created that poem you fell in love with, it took 3 hours, but every piece was gold. Would you value it more because it doesn't feel just like a random commodity? It just brought this really funny metaphor for me where I used to race around in my car all the time, in high school and college, and I had a pretty fast car that was a fairly new car. And I remember I was racing against this friend of mine, and he had a really old piece of shit car. And he said, Mike, it's unfair. I'm like, why? He's like, because you're using 20% of your car's power and I'm using 90% of my car's power and you're beating me every time. Right. And so it's one of these things of like, well, AI has such capacity that for it to write you that poem or that piece of art only took it a fragment of a microsecond, right? Whereas a human's capacity might have taken 5 days to write that same content. So in essence, AI moves so much faster with us in creation that we value it differently. So I might be using 100% of my time or 80% of my time to create a poem. AI is using 0.00001% of its capacity. And thus, like, and maybe the work product's the same, but it feels less fair because it's basically so much faster and better than us.
Yeah, mate, that might be it. I think the other thing also is, again, we intuitively associate time spent on a project with energy, energy expelled, energy invested. And I think energy and value are somewhat interchangeable, maybe not perfectly, but there's some kind of store of energy into the object, and that store of energy represents the value that's contained in that object. And so we have this primordial relationship between time and energy spent, and the energy imbued in that object, like a handmade watch, for example. What we're missing though with our intuitive sense of the world is that AI spends a shitload of energy, like actual electricity. They just does it in massive parallelism globally at the point of request. And so the energy is there, but we're not intuitively reading it because we associate time with energy.
Yeah, if you looked at the art and it said this took 45 liters of water worth of energy in order to create this art, like maybe we would think of it differently. Because right now, to your point, it feels like an unlimited resource that has no time or energy constraints. And therefore we value it super differently. Like we honestly don't value it. Like we consistently, constantly query it to do stuff. We throw away the work we don't like. We never apologize. Whereas if we're working with a human, I was with a guy this morning who used there to code, and he's like, it's unbelievable to me. I can build an entire thing through coding AI. And unlike with a human, if I don't like it, I tell him, just discard all that work. Let's start over. But with a human, I would never do that because I know they spend so much time, and I'd be concerned about their personal motivation if I told them all their work was wasted. So he's very comfortable wasting AI cycles, which of course we all are. At some point, we'll probably realize there is a real cost to AI. And even though we dispose of it so easily now, and we frankly use it to look up ridiculous things, at some point, maybe there does need to be a limited resource cost to it. So we value it differently.
So what we're really saying is we're using our caveman brains to use state-of-the-art tools, and all of our priors and intuitions are getting in the way. I will disagree with you on that last point. I think water, sanitation, electricity, literally for TVs and whatever, I think those things take way more energy and cost way more. Actually, and all the physical goods we buy and discard with cavalier casualness, like iPads and iPhones, there's enormous energy that goes into those, and we have no, in the Western world, in the wealthy world, we have no concern about that whatsoever. The amount of money, of child welfare, life force that's poured into these things, I don't think we're ever going to really be forced to reckon with the waste.
Totally agree. I totally agree with you.
Just one last point on this as well. Talking about the dispassion and the objective nature of AI, or our belief that it is more objective. I've seen a great YouTube video where they have AI debate AI about really hard topics. They've said, for example, you're a staunch pro-Israel supporter. You believe wholeheartedly Israel has a right to exist to defend itself, and you're a staunch Palestinian supporter. You believe Palestinians are occupied and whatever. And it's like, now argue, and these things argue in this like dispassionate, effective, articulate, brilliant way. And they did it about Ukraine and Russia, and about abortion, about everything. And they go back and forth in this highly structured, highly effective way. And then they have a panel of AI judges that listen in and then vote for which side won. And so you have this incredible, like, logical effort to unpack topics with this kind of dispassionate, articulate debate. It's incredible. I don't know what the channel is. We'll try to find it in the show notes and link it in the show notes. But yeah, speaking of AI helping to untangle our most deeply held beliefs and and tribal nature. I think this is really, really interesting.
I 100% love that. I'm always hoping there's a world where it's like warfare's fought just like drones via drones, and then we just decide who wins, or debates are AI versus AI, US versus US AI versus Russia AI. Let's like have a debate. Like, it's a super interesting question if you take conflict out of the human component and you drop it into like AI and robotics and technology fighting that for on our behalf.
There's a dystopian Star Trek episode that deals with this. I think now Trekkies are going to jump down my throat, but I think it's called "Let This Be Your Last Battleground." That's my. I want to say that's what it's called. But it's about this race that have been sending robots to attack robots, and Kirk is like, "You've been fighting this war for so long with so little consequences that you don't know how to do anything else, and you guys just need to stop this." And I think there was an episode in the original series, and there was an episode in Next Gen. In one of the first episodes, this like little drone chasing Riker around and trying to shoot him. I think that there's, So last couple of facts here that came out of the Sam Altman one. The one that was most interesting to me, that AI alone acting to diagnose patients is beating the accuracy and effectiveness of AI plus doctor teams. So when you get the AI to do the diagnosis and the work by itself and spit back an answer to the patient, it was more accurate, more effective, more efficacious than if you pair an AI with a doctor, because presumably the doctor would like be not trusting the AI, overriding the AI, adding their own creativity, and kind of, ruining the pure AI diagnosis. Humans are getting in the way, Mike. Humans are getting in the way.
Do you think that's because like when AI was first released and we all suddenly learned this term hallucination? Oh my God, the AI is hallucinating. We started with this general distrust. And so now we're still second guessing the engine because it started with so much false information.
I think so. I also think, and we talked about this 2 or 3 episodes ago, that there was this uncanny valley in AI responses. And it's related to that phenomena when you read a newspaper article and you're an expert on that topic, you realize how full of shit the reporting is, and it's just full of lies and misrepresentations. So when you ask ChatGPT about, let's say, product strategy or something you're an expert at, I find the answers to be utterly generic and middling and actually unspecific and useless. Yet when I ask it about other fields, I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I think also we, as experts, we don't trust the AI's expertise, but I think that's a problem of prompting. When you ask generic questions, you get generic answers. When you ask very specific questions, you think you get much more precise answers. And so it's like the old e-commerce days when the first few years of this, people go, watch out for your credit card details. Your credit card information is going to get stolen. And so for like a decade, people were like, I'm not giving my credit card to the internet.
Yeah. Don't use the real name. Don't use the real name on the internet. It's very dangerous. Yeah, I totally agree. It took a while for that to be. So I think all that goes away. I do think it's challenging to think that like, AI plus doctor equals worse results than just AI alone. But, gosh, I guess over time you would assume that would be true.
And the last thing he said, which I don't think I have fully digested, is this is related to the whole humans won't care about machines because we still care about each other and status and stuff. He said that Paul Buchetti once said to him, there will be machine money and there will be human money, and they will have no relationship to each other. The two economies won't connect. And he said that he found that profound. And I'm trying to understand the profundity for myself. And what I think he's saying is there will be this economy of status and value exchange and concern, and an economy, like a dynamic, complex economy between the machines we won't understand or be invested in or have any relationship to. And our economy of status and, money and value exchange will continue to live separately. If I'm understanding this correctly, and I'm not pretending that I am, I think there'll be an exchange rate. I think there'll be some interchange between those things. But I just think it's fascinating to imagine a whole machine world.
I've thought about this a lot with language. So if you think about people using AI to code right now, they're asking AI to generate code, but the code they're generating is so humans can read that code manipulate that code, parse that code, and then feed it back to a computer. So at some point, AI will have its own coding language only to be read by AI and other computers, right? And actually think about the efficiency, right? Because it's literally taking a computer language, turning it into a human language that's going back to ingest to the computer. It's stupid. It's going English to French, back to English, right?
This is like the way we create bullet points and we get ChatGPT to expand our emails. And on the other end, we just ask ChatGPT to summarize the email. And so we're compressing and decompressing it all day long. Yeah.
Yes. So it seems ridiculous to me that's not, I'm assuming that's already happened. But yeah, right now, we're using AI to write human code for computers, but but to your point with the currency, there'll also be a language, right? And that language might be computer instruction, and AI, it'll be much more efficient than what we're using with. It'll probably be faster, it'll be specific to AI, and then we'll have a translator, I assume, to try to take what AI is looking at and translate into human language versus the other way around.
We actually covered something about this called Jabber Talk the other day, where the machines, the voice agents are talking to each other over the phone, and one of them says, "Hey, I'm an AI actually," and it's like, "Oh, great, I'm an AI. Do you want to switch to Jabber Talk?" And they start sending modem tones down the line, basically. Pretty incredible. Mike, this has been such a fun, awesome conversation of philosophy and tech and business. It's so great to have you on the show. You need to come on more often.
We'll do it anytime you want. Love it.
That's awesome. Well, how can people find you on the internet? How can they follow your work? How can they reach out and ask you for money? Tell people how to reach you.
I'm M Jones ONE. That's my handle, M Jones ONE. I think on Twitter I'm M Jones, or on X I'm M Jones, but I'm pretty responsive. I'm online all the time. Obviously, I publish a bunch of content, and my website is science-inc.com for my venture fund, and I'm readily available there too.
Yeah, and you can find me on all the social media at Chris Sard, and on my website, chrissard.com and chrissard.com/newsletter. Mike, you're one of the coolest peeps I know, smartest people I know, and you just built and run and operate so much awesome stuff. So definitely go reach out to Mike, one of my favorite people ever. All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies already use Vanta. Why don't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.